I can't imagine having an RuneScape without new skills. That just doesn't that's always been a core identity of RuneScape is adding new skills and expanding the internet connectivity of the game. It doesn't make sense to me that RuneScape was adding new skills from 2001 from Classic to 2007, and then the 2007 version of the game was like, actually, we're never going to do that again. It's like, why not? That's kind of that's part of what makes the game so great. It's skills, quests, and combat, in my opinion.
Yeah, I do wonder what the pie chart kind of looks like, or maybe the Venn diagram of people that are actually fully anti new skill versus people that just really didn't want sailing and were in favor of something like shamanism, which on a personal note, shamanism would have been a devastating update to the game. I think that would have been way too much to start adding like power imbues and auras and random upgrades to every piece of armor. That would have been a nightmare. And I think, just to make it very clear, I mean, this was even before we were talking about ruinous powers. Ruinous powers got scrapped because it really was just overly complicated. It felt like in order to change a full prayer book, you had to just basically keep the same stuff that became meta, like redemption and things like that, and add it onto the new prayer book, because we just had so many metas revolved around the standard prayer book. And ruinous powers, in theory, before we had started really testing it, was just so cool. It was such a cool idea. And I feel like the same could be said about shamanism. I think just the fantasy of shamanism in your head is like, this is awesome. And then you actually start seeing the nitty gritty of like how much this would change over all of combat. And even just the idea of you rolling up to Tob with the boys, and then all of a sudden, like, you don't have your auras, you don't have your aura 3 power attachment to this piece of armor. You're trolling, basically, like you're a clown because you don't have all these auras and stuff. I just feel like that would have been a nightmare for the game. And I feel like the same can be said at a more mild note with sailing. Like, my fantasy of sailing, when I would think about it, 4.5 years ago, when I was talking with BC Guppy on the cast about like how sailing could just be like the greatest thing that ever came into this game, it was so easy for me to see all the potential good from it and not see how just difficult it is to make a successful sailing update that appeals to all players. And I feel like these days I'm pretty indifferent to sailing. I'm excited for it ultimately, but I feel like I am a lot more like grounded in like, okay, this is actually just going to be a skill. There will be boring parts of it, and ultimately it will just be kind of a grind to 99, which is a little upsetting for me. But I want to kind of hear your take, because you only have been playing for a year and a half actively. Are you like really looking forward to sailing? And if so, like, what are the aspects of sailing that really speak to you?
I am looking forward to sailing, and I want to preempt what I'm saying here by saying like it is a skill, so it's going to be monotonous at points, at many points probably, and that's fine, right? I can't name a single skill in the game that is not monotonous after enough time. Even really cool methods like Hollowed Sepulchre to me get really monotonous after the 300th, 3000th, lap. So that is just an inherent element of doing something over and over and over again. But sailing is really interesting. The main criticism, I will start with the criticism I have of sailing, is that it's like the third skill they would add to the game, or should have added to the game, because sailing is in scope so much larger than other skills could be, and they have yet to prove that they're able to do something simpler. So they're jumping into the most complex possible thing, and as a result of that, they have to sand down and grind down what sailing should be, which is even more crazy than what it is now. That's my hot take. I think sailing needs to be way crazier than what it is now, but because people are so scared of what a new skill could mean for the game, Jagex is like defaulting to making it, no, it's going to be you click on a sail every 16 seconds and then you're going to, get some sailing XP. It's like, no, like it could be way cooler than that, but I know why you have to do it like that, because for the people that just want woodcutting, or that's what they might expect, you kind of have to give them some of that. So that's my main criticism of sailing, is that maybe it should have happened later in the game's timeline, but as a concept, I love it. So here's 3 steps, 3 stages, I think 3, of why I love it. First is the output. An output of a skill is almost always more interesting, or should be, than the input. That's how you make an incentive to do the skill. Doing Giant's Foundry gets really boring, but you like the gold, right? That's kind of what Giant's Foundry gives you. But in a more interesting sense, doing sailing is really boring in my opinion, but the output is huge. Getting those huge PVM upgrades is really satisfying in Slayer. So the output has always been an incentive. Same with construction. It's like my favorite output of any skill. I love all the utility a house gives you. Sailing is like that, but like times five, where the output now is not just a singular increase to your utility, it's like a worldwide increase to your utility. It opens up so many elements of the game in a unique way. It's kind of like it synergizes so much with the game in a way that, in my opinion, a great skill should. And the second thing I want to bring up with sailing is that it also allows Jagex to piggyback off the things that they've learned by updating pre-existing outdated skills. When people complain, or maybe rightfully or whatever you might think, say that sailing feels like a mini game, I can't help but think, good. Yes, that's how most people train skills now. They do Wintertod, they do Guardians of the Rift, they do Giant's Foundry. They don't mine adamant ore. And that's, yeah, it should feel like you're engaging with something, and that might feel like a mini game to you, but it's also so much more expensive than every mini game in the, in the game. A mini game is usually small, it's instanced, it's very, very like in one room or two rooms. But here we have a skill that's the entire uninstanced open world that's just gotten bigger, and you can exit and do it whenever you want at any point, really. That's really cool. And they're using all that design methodology to kind of create something. They're using it to create a skill that doesn't require post hoc band-aids to fix. Not as much. And that's exciting. You have 6 different or 5 different training methods that can all be balanced with Jagex's current understanding of the game, rather than them needing to consider something made in 2003 or 2004. So that's kind of the quick spiel, or maybe long spiel about sailing and why I'm excited for it. Although with all that said, there are criticisms. You can't you there are, I'm not trying to pretend that it's the perfect thing. I think that like I don't look forward to the parts where I'm incredibly bored with doing something. The things that really incentivize me to continue doing something really boring in old school is the output. That's kind of the benefit of designing a game like old school, is that you can get players to kind of sit in this lull, this boring kind of environment, but they're so excited for what the return is. And the value of that return is determined by how much of that, like, how much you've overcome essentially. I always say that, being really good at tick manipulating and being really, really good at like PVM, or being in Counter-Strike, being really good at clicking heads, that's a skill, but patience is a skill as well. And old school RuneScape really values that skill too. So while I'm not excited about sitting there getting 93 sailing, to unlock something, in a standard method, what I am excited for is what that unlock is. And the better that unlock, the more excited I am for it, and the more excited I am for that skill itself. So that's kind of like the positive and negative there, where the reason I hate Slayer for the first 75 levels is because there is nothing to gain from it. It is so boring to just only look forward to the next level, because eventually you'll get something from it, maybe. But at 75 Slayer, at 85 Slayer, you're fighting a monster. I want the Abyssal Whip, and that's kind of that's what makes something like the grind feel worthwhile. So sailing really, I think, adds to that in spades without actually increasing player power, which is another genius element. And I think Jagex talked about that, where they don't need to make your number higher. They have this whole insular horizontal progression system applied to sailing, and giving reason for all these new ores and trees to exist without just making a better bow.
I think one of the interesting things about sailing, I think, well, actually, something that made me a little bit more excited about it was those duo training methods that they were kind of showing off. We won't have the Slayer plus sailing thing quite yet on launch, but they will have like mining and sailing and fishing and sailing. One of the, I guess, disappointing things about sailing is them, like you said, being too careful about them, like not really changing the meta. I mean, sailing really could have been a class of its own, where they could have just really focused on just fun and not traditional skilling. But I do understand where they're coming from. They have to appeal to a large cohort of players that, like, one, that are more purist, more want that feel of old school. I just feel like sailing as a sort of exploration skill had so much more to offer than just sitting at a little like spot and just AFK, sitting there digging up stuff from the sea. I don't know, just it's a little concerning to me. I think they really could have focused more on the adventure side of it. But
the sailing is such a broad concept that they can add things like that to the skill itself without ever feeling like they need to like justify it, right? Like if they can
true.
add a really cool adventure element to the skill, and I really hope that, and I know almost for a fact that they're going to do this, but like there's going to be so much opportunity in the first like 3 or 4 weeks of sailing to have tons, dozens of unique mysteries and unlocks, to find. Uh, so those first 3, 4 weeks are gonna be really fun. But how do we extend that to years and years down the line now that it's a permanent fixture of the game? And my hope is that Jagex is also considering that. Like, yeah, we have the woodcutting of sailing. We have digging up the salvage. Yeah, we have the, I don't know, Slayer Hunter contracts of sailing where you're delivering one thing to another thing. But now, how do we make it something different too? Not just an output, but like in action. We have the Hollow Sepulchre of sailing, right? With the little Barracuda trials. But like, what if it was something more too? That's what I really want them to do, because that's where there's potential for the evil word evolution of the concept of what a skill in old school RuneScape feels like. It doesn't need to feel like a chore if there's enough diversity in what you do with it, I guess.
And what are your thoughts on XP per hour for sailing? I feel like this is something that devs have been very clear on, that they're not trying to heavily focus on the numbers at this point. They're just trying to get the skill to feel good. But do you have a range in your head of what you would think would be optimal for XP per hour at like level 50, say, level 70, and then maybe level 99?
In my opinion, I think there's two scaling kind of systems with XP per hour that determine it, right? You have construction, which you can hit 1 million per hour if you're investing millions upon millions of GP into it. Side note, I love construction just for what it gives you. But on the other hand, you have skills that don't give them anything, and as a result, they're super, super slow because they only give you output. Um, I think sailing can operate in between, and the nice thing about developing a new skill is you can actually have it do both if you want, as to a certain extent. Where, in my opinion, skill expressive methods of training, not just gold expressive, but like skill expressive, should always yield like not disproportionately, but like way higher XP rates. And unironically, one of my criticisms of Hollow Sepulchre is how minor that increase is over agility proportion or over rooftops and arty proportionally for how much harder it is to learn than just clicking a green box, every 10 seconds or whatever. I think so. That's my impression of it. Like in my opinion, Hollow Sepulchre should be 150k an hour, and even then, it's like it's so much harder than rooftops. And it's just it feels weird to like, oh, it's 10%, 20% better, but you're doing 100 times more. So sailing to me is that. So I'm sorry, to answer your question, I would hope that same things would apply, right? Where a passive method might be like 50k, 60k an hour, but a really active method like the top end Barracuda trials would be pushing like 150, 160, even 200k, to not make the grind from 92 to 99 feel like you're spending 80 hours, bored out of your mind, I guess.
Hmm. Yeah,
That's my impression of it. Yeah.
I'm kind of with you. I think it's always a scary thing to say 200 or even 300k XP an hour, but whenever I say that, I'm talking top end, highest efficiency method at 99. So anything below that, because I've always been on the camp of just make the XP rates very, very reasonable and even generous to some extent. Where at 99 you are in the range of like 250k to 300k XP an hour if you're going to be full focused, and you're already are 99. I think at level 70, something like 160, 170, 180k at a reasonable training activity is good. So it's just something that's not like super intensive, but something that's not full AFK. Something along the lines of Hunter. I feel like Hunter, you can almost push up to 300k if you're a really, really sweaty black chin hunter. And then anything before that, you're really in that like mid 100k kind of range. I think that's just like perfect. I
Yeah,
feel
I
like
agree
for
with that.
sailing, that'd be good.
I think like things can be pushed too far, I think. But to me, it's always should feel satisfying. There's very simply put, skills should have, pun intended, I guess, a skill expression to them. They just really need to, and some skills have developed that just by proxy of players figuring out all the crazy emergent methods of the game, like 1.5 tick teaks, like like sandstone mining when you're tick manipulating it. I like doing that personally, and uh, all that stuff needs to now be baked into the game. Like we can't exist in a RuneScape where that's not a thing when it's a thing. And don't remove it because that's cool for people to actually express themselves. um, in unique ways. But simultaneously, the skill shouldn't also only be that. So having those different outputs, or sorry, inputs, would be really, really cool. And I hope that Jagex is considering. I don't know. I haven't spoken to anyone, working on sailing. Uh, I really hope that Jagex considers the level of satisfaction someone can get from getting really good at something after a long time, because that's the entirety of PVM and especially the entirety of PvP.